Coming up on today's episode of The Health Review.
Walking is one of the best things you can do as a new mum. Just because these things have changed and potentially aren't going to be the same as they were before, doesn't mean that you can't do the things that you did before. There are a lot of women who still have, 2 to 3 centimeters gap between their abdominal wall, but they can be incredibly functional. CrossFit athletes, lifting lots of heavy weights, doing all of this while still with what some might say is a compromised physique. Well, so a lot of people say that diets don't work, but the diet works. It's coming out the other side that doesn't work. So the biggest problem is that nobody is coached on what to do after they've lost the weight.
Hello and welcome back to The Health Review. I'm your host, Emily Rose Adams, and in today's episode, we're joined by the brilliant Lindsay Montgomery, a certified nutritionist, personal trainer, and founder of LM Nutrition and Fitness. With over 15 years of experience and a unique 360-degree approach to health, Lindsay works with people at all stages of life, but especially women navigating the physical and emotional demands of motherhood. In this episode, Lindsay shares simple, actionable advice for postpartum recovery, how to regain strength after birth, and what to even do before pregnancy to set yourself up for success. We also dive into weight loss myths, sustainable health habits, and her expert tips to avoid postpartum depression. So whether you're a new mum, you're planning a pregnancy, or just looking for honest and practical health advice, this one's for you. Lindsay, welcome to The Health Review.
Thanks for coming
having
on. Me.
You're very welcome. Thanks for being here. You are a certified nutritionist plus a personal trainer, which I love because I'm very passionate about this topic. I feel like the whole 360 approach is really important. So it's really impressive that what you're offering your clients is not only the nutritional support, but also the physical aspect too. I'm curious to know, you've been doing this a long time. You've had your own business for 15 years now. How did you get into it?
Well, I've just always been really interested in it. So I remember the first nutrition lesson that we had at school all those years ago, and I was immediately just hooked. I found it really interesting, and ever since then, I always knew what I wanted to do. I guess I was quite lucky from that aspect because a lot of kids really struggle to know what to do for their careers, and I was always really interested in nutrition, was always really sporty as a kid, got really into running. That sort of leads to going into the gym. And from leaving school, the natural progression for me was to do nutrition at university. From there, the progression was to do the personal training qualification, bring the two aspects together, immediately set up my business. And it's just all I've ever done, really.
That's so exciting. And I guess for you then, you perhaps haven't been through one of those sort of unhealthy stages, because I feel like a lot of people that come in here, and myself included, have ended up where we are because we've been through these kind of life-changing, health problems or events. But it sounds like you were always sort of interested in on the right path, which is nice.
Well, hopefully, yeah. I suppose so. I mean, a few blips in the road when you go to university and discover the love of cider or whatever it might be. But yeah, no, I've just always had a really keen interest. Obviously, it's never been perfect, but no, I know a lot of people come into this industry from doing other things, whether it's been a really stressful job as a lawyer, for example, and then they find themselves in yoga and then they turn to that instead. There's quite a lot of stories like that, but no, it's just always been what I've done.
And you're quite focused on also postpartum recovery. You've got children of your own. This is something you're helping clients with. What are some of the issues that your clients are coming to you with? So I guess you're looking at the nutrition plus the exercise side of things.
Well, one of the main issues, which is what everybody struggles with, is a lack of time. And then you throw some children into the mix and that time becomes even more precious. So that's probably the biggest issue, the biggest barrier to being able to eat well and focus on your fitness and focus on yourself. That's a huge issue. Another big issue, which is becoming more prevalent these days, is the confusion around health and nutrition and what to do with fitness. There's a lot of noise these days, a lot of misinformation. Everybody's pushing their own narrative. It can become very complicated. And that becomes an issue and that becomes a barrier, because if it becomes complicated, people don't really know what to do and they can get really overwhelmed and then almost push against it completely and just sort of think, I don't know what to do. I'm just not going to do anything at all. So you've got the barrier of having a lack of time. You've got potential barriers of just not really knowing what to do and confusion. Like a lot of what I do, especially in a nutrition consultation, is trying to just dispel myths of where the things that people now believe in because they've been doom scrolling on social media down some rabbit hole. And so, yeah, I think people are just feeling a little bit lost and they don't really know what to do anymore.
I think it is also quite confusing because not only is there a lot of misinformation, there are also a lot of conflicting studies because the science really is just evolving. It's a bit like coffee, for instance. One person is telling you it's the best thing you can ever do in terms of antioxidants. Another person is telling you that actually it's really bad for your cortisol levels. So I think it is very easy for people who are not trained and probably don't know how to kind of pick through that information to know, you know, what is best. Do you think an element of it is like how you feel? So sometimes being a bit intuitive in terms of how you're feeling after eating or drinking something in particular.
Yeah, hugely. I mean, take the coffee thing, for example. A lot of that could be based on your own personal experience. So where people sort of say, don't drink coffee first thing in the morning, it's going to spike your cortisol, you're going to be in a stress response. You know, some people, they might have a coffee in the morning and they might feel really anxious and it might hit them wrong. And for them, yes, maybe coffee first thing in the morning is something that they shouldn't be doing. But for some people, they could have a coffee, go about their day, be absolutely fine. It doesn't barely touch the sides. It's no issue. And so if you're drawing from your own personal experience and then putting that out there as information to people, I mean, yes, I guess it's helpful, but you also need to give the caveat of this is my personal experience. And when you're talking about studies, you can find a scientific study to back up any of your own bias, really. You know, you can be very clever with what you type into your PubMed search to find something to back up what you want to say. And so, yeah, you can go down all these rabbit holes and, like you're saying, focusing on yourself and how you're responding to things and your own experience is the most important thing. It's getting, you know, the water's getting even muddier with the new, like, all the trend for tracking. So people are wearing these tracking rings, or you've got your tracking watch, and we're just data, all about all these things that are going on with us. You know, you can track your sleep. You could wake up feeling kind of fine, but then you look at your tracker and it says you had a bad sleep and you're like, oh God, I feel awful today. Or for women, for example, you're tracking your cycle. You get alerts on your phone saying you're going to be grumpy today. And so you're like, yes, I'm grumpy today, you know, and you're not tuning into actually how do you feel? What's going on with you? How am I responding to the foods that I'm eating, the exercise I'm doing, and just like dialing it all back in and just trying to get rid of all of that background noise.
I have found myself getting a bit obsessed with my readiness score in the mornings.
Yes.
And like it's almost the first thing I'll do. And sometimes I'll check it before it's even loaded because you have to be awake for like half an hour or something on the Fitbit before you actually get the score.
Yeah.
It can be helpful though because I was trying to show my husband the difference between my PMS and like first day of period. My readiness score the day before my period is like really, really low. And then the day of my period, just that hormonal change when it comes, that relief, it then goes right up. And I'm like, look, PMS is
yes,
real.
It's not my
like,
fault.
There is data.
Yes.
So sometimes it can be helpful, but I know what you mean. With your clients, I guess, how important is it, do you think, that they focus on both the nutrition and the physical training, your body aspect of it?
Yeah, very important for everybody, really. A lot of people initially, when they go down a sort of health journey, they tend to focus more on the fitness. That is definitely changing over the last few years, and people are getting really interested in nutrition. But for a long time, people would automatically think, oh, I'm going to go to the gym, or oh, I'm going to see a personal trainer. And they go and they do that hour, but then they forget about the many other hours that are in a day and that are in a week. So you need to come at it from a holistic point of view and look at the nutrition as well as looking at the fitness, but also looking at other aspects such as the sleep, such as the stress. You know, you need to sort of take that 360 view when you're looking at how to optimize your health, because you can go and smash it in the gym, but if you're then not refueling with the right things, you're not going to be making the best improvements. And then also if you don't get a good night's sleep, and then if you're also heavily stressed, all of that can have an intertwine and interplay. And you need to sort of, and I know that saying you've got to sort all these things out can sound really overwhelming, but it's just trying to see what small changes you can make in each of those areas, which can then make a big improvement over time.
And what are some of those small changes? Because as you say, it does sound overwhelming, and it kind of, I think if you're not in that headspace yet, but you're curious and you want to be, you listen to something like this and it sounds like, oh gosh, I have so much to do, and I can't do all of that, and it just seems too sort of abstract and overwhelming. But actually, when you make these small changes, you might look back in like 6 months later and think, oh wow, I've actually really changed my lifestyle a lot, and it doesn't feel so overwhelming if you do it kind of gradually. What would you recommend to some of your clients who come and see you, who perhaps are at that point where they just really want to kind of make change but don't know where to start?
So you'd look at what you're already doing and just see how you can optimize that a little bit. So for example, everybody talks about 10,000 steps a day, but let's say you're only doing 2,000 steps a day. So you don't go, right, I'm going to do 10,000 steps a day now, because that sounds a bit impossible potentially. So you'd say, okay, so I'm going to do 3,000, and let's see if I can just make that small improvement with that. And then on top of that, I go to bed at midnight and I get up at 5 a.m. So now I'm going to try and go to bed at 11 instead. So then there's that small improvement, and then maybe that becomes more of a habit over time. You try and go to bed a bit earlier, you try and do a few more steps. And then if you're looking at your nutrition, you think, oh, well, I actually only have 2 portions of fruit and veg a day. I'm just going to try and have 3. Optimally, we want way more than that, but eventually that can come over time. So you just look at all of the different aspects, look at where you are now, and you just think, what little thing could I add in there to make that just that little bit better? You don't have to go from 0 to hero straight away. You just need to slowly progress yourself over time.
And do you think with something like nutrition, thinking about it more like what can I add in rather than what can I take out, seems a bit easier to kind of come to terms with?
Yeah, I think so. And it also just promotes more of a positive mindset towards all of it. Where if you're always thinking of taking away, it puts in that sort of restrictive mindset, which can be quite damaging as well. So trying to think about how I can enhance what's going on, how I can add in, that's a much more positive way to view it, rather than thinking, as soon as you say I can't do something, all you want to do is do that thing.
Yeah.
So either adding in or even replacing something for something else is a bit more of a positive way to look at things.
And for you personally, you've got, is it 2 children you've got?
Yes.
Oh, lovely. You've got children, you've got a business, you've got a busy life. What does your exercise schedule look like? How do you kind of fit that into your life?
Well, so it looks a lot better now. And that's what I say to all of my new mums. One day you'll get it back. So now I'm currently, I've got a half marathon this weekend.
Wow.
So set myself a goal. I was like, I'm in a good place. So my children are now 5 and 3. I feel like I've slightly come out the other side of that madness. And so set myself a goal to aim towards, because otherwise, I don't know, you can lose a bit of motivation, or you're not really progressing anywhere. So set that goal. So now my fitness at the moment, so there's a lot of running going on, always trying to do the strength work in the gym. I try to commit to doing 4 times a week of some form of exercise, but more often than not, that only looks like 3. And, that's coming from a personal trainer, someone who knows all about fitness and health. And even I'm not perfect. So people setting these high expectations sometimes need to lower the bar a little bit, or just understand that it won't always be perfect. Trying for 4 or 5 times a week, if it only is once, sometimes at least you're consistently doing something.
And I guess that's the key for especially postpartum fitness. Obviously, I think for all of us, we go through phases in our lives. So perhaps work will get more stressful. You're working longer hours. You're going through some kind of emotional event in your life. So perhaps exercise is cut down. You go through phases, and that's normal for everyone, I guess. But for postpartum, that is a longer period of time for people, where it could take a few years before you start feeling like perhaps your child might not go to nursery for a few years, or whatever. But getting the balance with work is really hard for a lot of women in particular. So I guess anything is better than nothing, right?
Yes.
So how do you approach that with your clients?
So just keeping the expectations on yourself low, which can sound a little bit pessimistic and a little bit like, we want to be a go-getter or whatever. But sometimes you've just got to lower the bar. And if you set your expectations on yourself too high, sometimes you can just set yourself up for failure. So let's say you're like, oh, I'm going to exercise 5 times a week. I'm never going to eat processed foods. I'm going to do all these things. And then your baby gets ill, for example, or they're going through a clingy phase. They never want you to put them down. There's a bump in the road. You can't stick to what you've done. You feel like you've failed, and then that can just lead to this spiral of like, well, sod it, I'm just going to give up. Whereas if you've set yourself a lower bar and you can achieve it, or maybe you achieve it and then some, you get all of those good positive feelings. You get really motivated. Your self-esteem is boosted. Your confidence is boosted. So you're going to do more, and then you set that bar a little bit higher, and then you manage to reach that, and then you just keep going from there. But you just don't put such high, heavy expectations on yourself, and then you're just going to slowly build that confidence over time and know that you can do it.
I think that's really key. Is again the messaging, being kind to yourself, being sort of rational and not expecting your body to be what it was pre-kids, not being able to do those intensive sort of strength sessions for a while. You know, that might take some time to get back. I always feel like with me, it's when I started exercising. So my kind of health and fitness journey started about 6 or 7 years ago. And I always thought to myself, if you can just manage 20 minutes, 20 minutes of jogging, 20 minutes of swimming, or whatever that looks like, just 20 minutes in the gym, even if that's the maximum you can do, you start really seeing progress. And 20 minutes just seems more doable to everyone than an hour solid in the gym or whatever. So having a smaller number in your mind makes it kind of more achievable. Also for mums, what would you recommend? I mean, you see mums in the park running. They've got are there special buggies?
Buggies.
Yeah, running buggies. Oh gosh, yeah. And then I saw a neighbour recently who's had a baby not long ago, and she says she's joined fitness classes where you put all the babies in the middle. Yes. And you do a group exercise class. This is quite popular. So there are things you can do because obviously you've got this lovely little baby with you, and for most people you don't get any time away. So I guess finding time apart from when they're napping to actually exercise is quite hard. So what sort of things would you recommend if someone's in that position right now?
Yeah, so I do run these mum and baby classes, and they bring the babies, and it's complete chaos, but it's lovely. And then the toddlers come, and it's really nice. So that is an option if you've got that nearby. But really, it's just home exercise. Like, get on board with exercising at home. And I know it's not for everybody, and even if it's not your thing, you've got to just do what's accessible to you. You've got to try and remove as many barriers as you can. You know, like you're saying with those 20-minute workouts, that really is all that it needs to be. If you're thinking of going to the gym, you've got to factor in getting to the gym. You've got to factor in childcare. You've got to factor in getting home from the gym. That can look like an hour and a half round trip where you also have to have someone looking after your kid. Whereas if you work out at home, you don't need to have any equipment, but if you could have a set of dumbbells or some resistance bands, then that's even better. And you just need space for a mat to go on the floor. And you can just press go on a YouTube video to even take the thought process out of it from thinking about what you need to be doing. So when I had my first child, I just used to exercise on the floor at home. And she would just be in her bouncer, just staring at me, finding it absolutely hilarious and loved it. And like, obviously that's not perfect. Sometimes she'll kick off. You don't get the time that you need. Or if by chance she's down for a nap and she napped for like half an hour, amazing. Then I could get half an hour in. And again, it just goes back to these expectations that you set on yourself and the workout that you're going to have. Even if you only manage to do 10 minutes, and even if that whole 10 minutes you're holding the baby in your arms while you're doing whatever you're doing. Just getting used to the fact that it's not going to be perfect, and adapting to home workouts is really key to get the consistency in, because you know really that you'll always be able to do that and have that time is really important. Just trying to find ways where you can take away as many barriers as possible.
And what areas, I guess there is a period of time you have to wait before you can start exercising again if you've just had a baby. But how long is that? And also what type of exercises would you recommend that people focus on?
So how long that is very dependent on the pregnancy, the birth, any complications, how you're recovering. Usually you're told to wait until you've had your 6-week check with the doctor. But as any woman that's gone for that 6-week check with the doctor will know, you're not really learning much about yourself during that process. But that sort of 6 weeks is usually a general marker for like maybe your body has healed enough for you to start again. And if you've had a cesarean section, then you're adding a few more weeks, even a month or two onto that before you can start up again. But again, we're going back to dialing into yourself and how you're feeling and how you're responding. You might not be ready after 6 weeks. You might not be ready after longer than that. You've got to just play around with it, see how you feel and how your body responds to what you're doing. And if it feels good, keep going. If it doesn't, don't. And just start really slow. Don't start off thinking that you can do what you were doing before, because your body has changed. Even the whole mechanics of your body has changed, where you've grown and adapted to fit a baby in your body and push it out. So you've got to bear all of that in mind. Your hormonal profile looks a bit different. You've got the hormone relaxin that's still kicking around in your system, which can make your joints, less stable, and that can have an effect on your exercise. So you've got to think about all of these aspects. If women can, I would always recommend that they go to see a women's health physio for a mummy MOT. It is expensive, but if you can afford to invest in that, it's really helpful just to know where you're at, and then you can get a full diagnosis of what's going on. And usually they would give you some advice on to how to improve, what's going on with your pelvic floor, what's going on with your core, and then you can go from there, and then just feel a bit more empowered that what you're doing is safe for the position that you're in.
Yeah. It is really important. We've done another episode on this topic, and it's really sad that so many women have struggled with that and haven't been able to see someone. And there's now more of a conversation about this. There's more awareness about the recovery, particularly in that area, pelvic floor region. I guess it's a really sort of important piece of the puzzle, because it can lead to you exercising more if you're feeling more comfortable in that area, I guess. Because if you are suffering with incontinence problems, pain, you're much less likely to go try a jog in the park or start working on your core and things like that. Would you say that people who are thinking about having children, people who are pregnant, are there certain things you should be doing to get your body ready for that sort of change?
Just trying to stay strong, which, is kind of all aspects of life, really. But pregnancy, your body changes quite a lot. Obviously, you're sort of expanding through your hips and then essentially growing through your front. So just trying to maintain strength throughout your body, especially focusing on your posterior chain, so all the way down your back of your body to help support the growing weight that's coming in front, is really beneficial. And just trying to keep moving. If the stronger you are during your pregnancy, usually really the better you'll recover as you come out the other side. Just trying to just maintain as best you can what you're already doing.
And I mean, in terms of expectations, after having children, I think you hear lots of stories about certain parts of your body will never fully go back to where it was before, because there are so many changes. Your organs have to shift, move to tight spaces to make room. Things like, your rib cage never fully kind of goes back to the size. So perhaps you'll have a slightly broader feel around your rib cage. Are things like that true?
Yeah, can be. Yeah, again, it's completely individual. Some people will get the separation from their abdominal wall, the diastasis, and that could never go back again. But what you need to know is that just because these things have changed and potentially aren't going to be the same as they were before, doesn't mean that you can't do the things that you did before. There are a lot of women who still have, 2 to 3 centimeters gap between their abdominal wall, but they can be incredibly functional, doing, CrossFit athletes, lifting lots of heavy weights, doing all of this stuff while still with what some might say is a compromised physique, because you've got that gap. But as long as you've got the awareness, and again, you're building up the strength slowly, and there are no negative symptoms from doing the things that you're doing, then you kind of know that you're okay to keep going. You're just adapting to the new body that you're in, I suppose.
Sorry to interrupt. If you're enjoying today's episode, please do subscribe or give it a follow so we can keep giving you excellent content and bringing on amazing guests that hopefully you're loving on the Health Review podcast. Now back to the show. And obviously you help people through the nutritional side of things too. When it comes to weight loss, I know that's a really difficult area for a lot of women who've given birth. And as we've said before, the expectation is to try and lose that weight quickly. What mistakes do you think women are making in terms of that path, and maybe the messaging they're telling themselves?
Oh, yeah, it's all quite negative, I suppose, isn't it? Trying this all or nothing approach and thinking that it will all be solved really quickly, or there's a magic pill that they can take and then everything will be fixed and everything will be fine. It's a process. The process will look different for every person. Everyone's weight loss journey is really different, and what works for one person might not work for another person. So not, getting stuck if you don't get on well with one thing. There are so many options out there for you. And just like going back to what we were saying before, you've got to be kind to yourself. There are a lot of things going on in your life when you first have a child, and trying to take that pressure off yourself to also be losing weight. Is that so important right now? Or can you focus on other things, getting yourself healthy, getting yourself fit and strong again, and then naturally perhaps the weight will come off. But if it doesn't, maybe you can focus on that later down the line. Ultimately, being on a diet, focusing on weight loss is a stressor on the body.
Yeah.
And you're already stressed. You're not sleeping properly, potentially. Your body's recovering from being pregnant and then giving birth. So adding more stress onto that could just have negative implications for all sorts of things. So you've just got to be realistic with yourself. Perhaps it's not the right time yet. Work on what you can work on. And again, it's just like taking these slow baby steps from there.
And I guess nutrition is incredibly important. If you're not sleeping much, it's getting the right foods in, which will help fuel your body, repair those changes and things that have been happening, and kind of get you through the day. I guess nutrition is one of the biggest things you can do post-birth to kind of get you back on track in terms of energy levels and recovery. What are there any meals or things, ingredients you would suggest to your clients? Quick things, perhaps they don't have much time or energy to be making big elaborate meals anymore. What sort of dishes would you recommend?
Well, so first of all, use your future self to help. Use your past self to help your future self. So when you're pregnant, can you batch cook a load of stuff and shove it in the freezer? Really easy meals that you can just shove in, defrost or shove in the microwave. A lot of times the baby won't let you put them down. So what can you take out of the freezer with one hand and put in the microwave? And can you make snacks or buy snacks that are healthy, good for you, that are grab and go, that you can just eat with one hand if needs be. And so all of that's really easy. Then things like smoothies come into play. Really helpful thing in the morning. If you're rushing around trying to get everything sorted, you can whiz up a smoothie with all sorts of healthful ingredients. And then you can just drink that on the go. It's, again, if you've got your baby in your arms, you can be using one hand to hold the baby, one hand has got your smoothie. That's a really helpful thing to have. And then just batch cooking whenever you do get the time to do it. And also remembering that it's not all on the woman. You might have a partner that's at home with you that you also need to rope in to come and help you with all of these things. And there are so many quick meals that you can make. You just have to be prepared. Make sure that you've got the food in the house. And then it's just a case of Googling 20-minute meal, 10-minute meals. You can easily make a stir fry. You can throw a load of things together to make a salad. It doesn't have to be complicated. There are lots of recipe books out there now that have, Jamie Oliver kicked it off with his 30-minute meals. Then he did even better with his 20-minute meals. It's more about planning and being prepared. If you don't have the food in the house or, the pre-cooked meal in the house, that's when it gets difficult and it gets complicated because you're trying to scrabble together. Whereas if you have a plan and you're prepared, then you're much more likely to be able to get the right nutrition in.
And I guess pregnancy, you do have 9 months to start preparing. So I guess this is a sensible message for people that perhaps, if you're not confident in the kitchen yet and you don't have your staple, 10 meals that you can kind of do without following a recipe, and it's relatively stress-free. Like, obviously sometimes cooking can be overwhelming, but I think if you've got your sort of set meals that you can do, hopefully if a baby arrives and you're quite experienced with them, you've been making them for some time, that you can still kind of incorporate that type of food. Because I guess the worst thing you can do is end up, when you're tired and you haven't slept, it's like you start craving really the wrong types of food.
Yes.
And then you're kind of reaching for the crisps or the kind of quick ready meals, things like that, which are not going to fuel your body in a way which I guess is so important at that stage in your life.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you're not really thinking, and that sleep deprivation does make you want that quick fix, and your hunger hormones can be going a bit crazy if you haven't been sleeping properly. And then if you're also breastfeeding, you can be on a little bit of a roller coaster. Like, all of a sudden you can just be ravenous, like that proper sort of shaky, almost anxiety feeling of hunger that you can get when you're breastfeeding. And if you don't have, these grab and go snacks at home that do have healthful, like nutrient dense properties to them, you are just going to grab that chocolate bar because you're like, oh my God, I'm having a bit of a panic attack here almost. I need something. And you don't think about it. You just need that fuel and you need it now. So having those things in your house prepared can just mean that you're going to make a better choice when you get into those sticky situations. Yeah,
that's great. And in terms of supplements, I know that obviously you're a nutritionist. So do you take a kind of food first approach with people?
Yes.
Like, do you recommend supplementation? Obviously, we don't want to recommend specific supplements because everyone is so different. But are there any markers that you need to look out for, like post-pregnancy, post-birth?
Well, definitely taking a food first approach. And when it comes to supplementation, it's very, as you're saying, individual, depending on what people would need. And when you're coming into, the postpartum recovery, nutrition doesn't really change. You're still trying to do all the basics and get a good balance of your macronutrients and your micronutrients, just trying to make sure that you're getting a balanced plate so that you're covering all of your bases. When you're thinking about recovery, especially if you've had a cesarean section, for example, which is major abdominal surgery and your body's got a lot to recover from, making sure you're having adequate protein, for example, to help your body to repair itself, and then focusing heavily on your veggies and your fruits, getting a lot of variety in there so that you're having the more variety that you have from your diet, you're going to guarantee that you're covering all your bases in terms of the vitamins and the minerals that you need to help support your immune function and to support your hormonal health and to help support that recovery as you're coming out the other side. It doesn't need to be complicated, or even like approaching it from a minimalistic approach of like, well, what specific nutrient do I need? Everything works in synergy with each other. So thinking about having that balanced plate where you've got some nice whole grains, you've got your good source of protein, and then you've got all of your veggies, and that sort of really simple, really basic balanced plate is kind of really all that you need.
And I guess in terms of mental health, this can be a really vulnerable time in someone's life, and postpartum depression is a thing, and people who perhaps haven't experienced depression before might experience it post birth. Are there any tips in terms of, getting into a routine with your health and fitness that are really important to try and mitigate that risk of perhaps ending up in that frightening situation?
Yeah, looking after yourself really is number one, because the baby comes and obviously it's all about the baby. Your whole priority shifts and it's all about that child, but you can't lose yourself in that as well. You've also got to look after yourself just as much as you're looking after your baby, because you've got to show up for that baby every single day. And looking after your mental health is really important. You can become very vulnerable. You can be lonely, isolated, getting out of the house. Like walking is one of the best things you can do as a new mum, because, well, neither of my children would sleep unless they were being rocked. So I used to chuck them in a sling and I would just walk all day. And yes, that had its benefit because it got my child to sleep, but also just getting out into the fresh air. And if you're lucky enough to live near nature, going out for a nice walk through the woods or whatever it might be. It's so cliche and it's so obvious, but it genuinely is really helpful just to get out, move your body, clear your head. And if you have some mum friends nearby, going and having a chat, because everybody's having a really hard time. And now people do talk about it, which is really helpful. Most people won't just say, it's all perfect and great and I love it so much. People are really honest and that's really helpful. So going, and if you can go for a walk with friends and you can talk about how you're all struggling, that is, that's just like the easiest, cheapest therapy that you could find.
About 10 years ago, I used to teach sort of baby music classes.
Yes.
And it was so cute because seeing the new mums come in was really nice, because a lot of them, you haven't yet had your child in school, so you haven't made the mum friends yet.
Yeah.
I think it can be quite an isolating experience. And it used to be really heartwarming seeing, these connections being made. And I think when you've got babies at the same age, they're kind of reaching similar milestones at the same time. And I guess finding your sense of self, is important, and maintaining that. So how do you kind of, with your health and fitness, how would you say you kind of keep that sense of self going?
Yeah, well, again, it just comes down to just having your realistic expectations on yourself and knowing that not every day is going to be perfect. And sometimes you might put all your running stuff on and be ready to go, but your baby's got a different idea, or you're just not really feeling it. And just be like, that's okay. It doesn't matter. There's always tomorrow. I don't have to go and do this right now if it doesn't feel right for me. But then also keeping in the back of your mind how it makes you feel when you do it. Starting is always the hardest bit. So I go to this boot camp on Tuesday evenings and I never want to go, especially in the winter when it's dark. But I book in so that I have to go. And then as soon as I'm 5 minutes in, I absolutely love it. And when I don't want to go, I hold into my mind, you feel so great as soon as you've done this, like just go and do it. And sometimes maybe I'd get there and I'm like, I'm not really feeling it, but I'm still here and I'm outside and I'm just going to move my body and it's fine. I'm not going to push it, like whatever. So trying to hold in your mind how good it makes you feel when you do it, but then also understanding that sometimes you're not going to do it, and that's totally fine, and you need to let that sit well with you. It doesn't have to be perfect. You shouldn't have to feel like you're pushing yourself all the time to do things if you don't want to.
Yeah, that makes total sense. I think it's like small gains, isn't it?
Yes.
That's a good way to look at it. And in terms of weight loss, obviously that is a focus for postpartum mothers, but it's also a focus for a lot of people. And as we've said about misconceptions online, what are some of those that you've seen which kind of frighten you a little bit?
Yeah, it's all a bit wild, isn't it? There are so many. We could go on for days. So many misconceptions. Like, where do you even begin? And also, when it comes to weight loss and diets, different things will work for different people. So, there's that big don't eat carbs movement. I mean, that's sort of falling by the wayside now. But before that, it was like the low fat movement. And you're like, well, what do I do? Do I not eat fat? Do I not eat carbs? I don't know what I'm going to do. And then now it's like the new carnivore diet, like only eating meat. And it's incredibly confusing. And it just comes back to, again, these basics of your balanced plate and looking at what is going to work for you, and also having the understanding that your diet or your weight loss phase is just a phase, and you can take different measures that you might not still be doing in the long run. So let's say you do decide to cut out carbs to lose weight, which the only reason that works is because essentially you're cutting out a major food group, and so your calorie intake is lower. There's no magic behind it. But let's say that's what you decide to do to lose weight. You only need to do that until you've lost that weight, and then you're coming out the other side into your next phase, and maybe you want to reintroduce carbohydrates again. So you do. So you see that weight loss phase as just a phase, and then you move into your other phase, and it sort of ebbs and flows a little bit like that. And whichever route that you decide to take might not work. You might try a different route. You might mix up the things that you're doing. It's just trying not to be so stuck on one ideal, I suppose.
What are your thoughts? I'm curious about drastic weight loss, because I guess the key to a lot of weight loss is something that's sort of healthy, sustainable. So I think there are a lot of people out there who unfortunately go through the whole yo-yo process, which can be quite challenging, because you'll initially feel great and you've put yourself on a really restrictive diet. And then, perhaps a year later, that weight's been put back on. And I think that's quite a common sort of process that some people go through. How do you manage that with your clients? So is it about kind of gradual weight loss?
Yeah. Well, so a lot of people say that diets don't work. There was that study coming out that said, 95% of diets don't work. Everybody's regained the weight within 2 years. But the diet works. It's coming out the other side that doesn't work. So the biggest problem is that nobody is coached on what to do after they've lost the weight. So then they come out of that diet, a bit like I was saying with the phases. You've got the phases where you were in your diet, and then that second phase is often more important. How do I then live in my new body? I don't know how to do that because I was dieting and now I'm not dieting. So you go back to the habits that you had before. So before I would help somebody lose weight, I would make sure that they've got those healthy habits in place first, so that they know what to go back to once they've lost the weight that they wanted to lose. So you're looking at it from these different phases. So we'll make sure that we've got those healthy habits in place. More often than not, you're having to really work hard on their relationship with food. A lot of people have a really bad relationship with food, which is stemming from poor body image, a lot of restrict and binge cycles you've got to break people away from. Get them into those really healthy habits. Usually doing that, they tend to lose weight anyway, because everything's starting to sort of sort itself out. But if they're not, then you start to look at dieting phases. And sometimes we will do a more aggressive approach for a couple of weeks because people can find it really motivating. So you'll cut the calories really low, do that for a few weeks. They'll lose a lot of weight, feel really motivated. And then you continue to coach them to maintain that body weight that they are now at. And you'll sort of do it in phases like that. So you're constantly working with that individual, and all the bumps in the road, metabolic shifts, things like this, you're always working with what's happening and how the body is responding, and seeing it as phases rather than just I need to lose 5 stone, let's go. And you're just sticking to one thing, 5,000 calorie deficit, or whatever, 500 calorie deficit every day for however long it takes you to lose 5 stone. That can seem daunting, and it can seem like a long slog. So breaking it down into phases can be a little bit more helpful.
And I guess that highlights, the kind of importance of seeing someone like yourself, because you do want to make sure, I guess, if you're going on a diet like this, at whatever stage you might be in your life, you really want to make sure that you're getting all of your nutrients in. In terms of if someone listening right now is feeling a bit stuck, whether that be having had children, having not had children, perhaps busy careers, busy lives, we all have very busy lives these days. If they're feeling a bit stuck in their health and fitness journey, whether that's nutrition or exercise, do you have any sort of advice that you could share on that?
Try and get rid of the noise, and tune into yourself. We're all so distracted by everything else that's going on around us that we've sort of lost our intuition and how we feel about things and what's right for us, and what do we need to do to help ourselves. So if you're feeling a bit stuck, perhaps you're confused with all the information that's out there. You don't really know what to do. So ignore all of it and take it back to the basics. The basics always work. They still work. Take it back, right back to the basics. Trim it all back. See what works for you. You know, if you're stuck with your fitness, maybe you're not enjoying it. Maybe you need to do something different. You know, not everybody needs to go and do strength and conditioning 4 times a week. Maybe you like dancing. Go to a dance class. You know, how does it look for you? Ignore what everybody else is doing and what everyone else is saying. You've got to find the route that works for you, your lifestyle, and what motivates you. So things that you're interested in, and just trying to tune in rather than being distracted by all the noise that's out there these days.
I think that's really good advice. In terms of your business, your clients, where can people find you, and what do your sessions look like? So if someone's interested in coming to see you, what will that process look like?
So I'm based in Buckinghamshire. So if you wanted to see me face to face, you'd have to be around there. But I do online fitness coaching. I do online nutrition coaching as well. So yeah, it's just a case of getting in touch and seeing what's available, what the options are to work with somebody, and where to find me. If we're talking about social media and cutting out the noise, I am pretty hopeless at social media, which is probably obvious. Go through waves. But yeah, so social media, I've got Instagram. It's LM_nutrition and fitness. And I do try to put out helpful content when I get the time to. It's just one of those things.
I've seen some of you've done some myth busting sort of reels, which I think are really helpful in terms of just a little reminder sometimes about, you know, what is kind of accurate on social media and just how to kind of look out for it. So I look forward to seeing more content from you. Lindsay, it's been such a pleasure. Thank you for coming on the Health Review.
Thank you.
And let's get you back again.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.
Thank you.